So if you've got a Bible with you, go ahead and find Genesis chapter 32. Genesis chapter 32. You've heard of Jacob before. He had a twin brother named Esau. And as they came out, Jacob was holding on to the heel of his brother. That was when he got the name Jacob, which literally meant the supplanter. If I was going to give tonight a title, it would be What's in a Name? Because we're going to discuss several different places where names were changed in order for folks to remember what God has done. Jacob and Esau, we remember the story of Jacob telling his brother, he said, "Sell me your birthright and I'll give you a meal." Well, then after that, later on down the road, Isaac said, "I'm going to bless Esau, so go and get me a meal." And Jacob, being crafty and cunning along with his mother's help, slips in and pretends to be his brother. And as a result, he receives the blessing, the stolen blessing from Isaac. Needless to say, Esau is not very happy. And he actually, in Scripture, we learn, was prepared to kill his brother. So Jacob takes off. And Jacob goes to the land of his uncle Laban. And I'm skipping over a good bit of context, but let me give you the highlights. Uncle Laban and Jacob strike up a deal, and then Laban kind of falters on that deal. Jacob's frustrated, Laban's frustrated, but eventually, by the time we get to Genesis 32, we find everything to be okay. Laban, Jacob, they have made amends. And God has said, hey, it's time for you to go back to the land of your upbringing. It's time to go back to who? Esau. That's a problem. Jacob says, I'm not really sure I want to go back. Last time I checked, Esau was ready to kill me. Now, it's been years, but I'm still a little nervous. I'm still a little frightened. But, Lord, I'm going to trust you with this. Sort of. Genesis chapter 32. Look at verse 22, and we're going to read straight through to verse 32. Now he arose that same night, and took his 2 wives, and his 2 maids, and his 11 children, and crossed the ford of the Jabbok. He took them and sent them across the stream, and he sent across whatever he had. Then Jacob was left alone, and a man wrestled with him until daybreak. When he saw that he had not prevailed against him, the angel touched the socket of Jacob's thigh, so that the socket was dislocated while he wrestled with him. Then he said, "Let me go, for the dawn is breaking." But Jacob said, "I will not let you go unless you bless me." So he said to him, "What is your name?" The reply, "Jacob." He said, "Your name shall no longer be Jacob, but Israel, for you have striven with God and with men and have prevailed." Then Jacob asked him and said, "Please, tell me your name." The angel said, "Why is it that you ask my name?" And he blessed him there. So Jacob named the place Peniel, for he said, "I have seen God face to face, and yet my life has been preserved." Now the sun rose upon him just as he crossed over Peniel, and he was limping on his thigh. Therefore, to this day, the sons of Israel do not eat the sinew of the hip, which is on the socket of the thigh, because the angel touched the socket of Jacob's thigh and the sinew of the hip. A couple of things I want to establish tonight, but the first one is this. Sometimes God will allow us to operate under our own strength. He will. How many times in Jacob's life had he tried to do things on his own, under his own strength? Well, for one, he told his brother, "Sell me your birthright, and then I'll feed you." And later, he said, "I tell you what, I'm going to dress up like my brother in order to get something that's going to help me." Jacob was obviously the type of person who was trying to do things on his own for his sake, trying to benefit himself. Same situation happens here. They're on the shoreline of the Jabbok, and he says, "I'm going to send my family across, but I'll stay behind just in case Esau shows up." If we read a little bit further back, we understand that he sent his possessions, his camels, other servants, and that sort of folks across earlier in 2 different groups. That way, in case one group was attacked, the second group would survive. Now, in 32, Jacob said, "Father, protect me." But then he tries to do things on his own in this way. So sometimes God will allow us to operate under our own strength. It seems like an awful lot of scheming, but there are times when you and I are just like Jacob. We try all we can to say, "Lord, I can't handle this one, it's yours." But then in reality, you hold on to a little bit of it. You know what I'm talking about? It's in those times when we begin to understand what God's strength is all about. You see, God allowed Jacob to work and operate under his own strength. And you see that in verses 22 to 24. But starting in 25, we see something else. We see that God drove Jacob back to himself. Verse 25 and 26. When he saw that he had not prevailed against him, that's the angel prevailing against Jacob, he touched the socket of his thigh, so that the socket of Jacob's thigh was dislocated while he wrestled with him. Then he said, what? Let me go, for the dawn is breaking. I will not let you go unless you bless me. Jacob has been trying, he's been arguing, he's been fighting, he's been wrestling all night long. It says they wrestled all during the evening and then up to the morning, up to daybreak. And so Jacob looks at the angel and he says, I'm not going to let you go unless you bless me. Commentators will say that that is the moment when Jacob's life purpose changed. Jacob saw that he couldn't do things on his own. He tried, and the angel obviously had trouble because he dislocated the hip. But no matter how hard Jacob tried, he realized that he wasn't going to be able to accomplish his task without but a blessing from God. So when we see verses 25 and 26, we understand that God will allow us to do things under our own strength up to a point. And when we're given out, to use a phrase from around here, when we're given out, all of a sudden, that's when we turn things over to the Lord. And that's when God draws us back to Him. Look at verse 27. He said to him, what is your name? And he said, my name is Jacob. Your name shall no longer be Jacob, but Israel. For you have striven with God and with man, and you have prevailed. The angel changed Jacob's name. Well, that seems like a little bit of a cliche thing. What matters? What does this even matter? The answer is this. In the Hebrew culture, in the Hebrew society, a name meant everything. That was your identity. For Jacob, he was known as the supplanter. That's been the case his whole life. But now, after he has had this encounter with the angel now changes his name to Israel. And it will be that from here on till the day that Israel now dies. So Jacob's got a name change. What does that look like for us? We operate under our own strength. We do things up to a certain point, and then we finally give our hands up and say, Lord, I can't do it. And we do what Jacob said, Lord, bless me. When that happens, our name changes. My name changed on June 14th of 1995. It changed from Marshall to Christian. No longer was I striving for myself, was I trying to do things on my own. But as the term Christian literally means little Christ, my purpose at that moment was to bring honor and glory to my Father. No longer to me, but to Him. Same situation for Jacob. Jacob's name has been changed from the supplanter to he strove with God. He struggled, he strove, and yet what happened? If you look in verse 28, we see that he changes the name of the location. Verse 28. Your name shall no longer be Jacob, but Israel, for you have striven with God and with man and have prevailed. Then Jacob asked him, tell me your name. Why is it that you ask my name? And he blessed him there. Verse 30. Jacob named the place Peniel, for he said, I have seen God face to face, and yet my life has been preserved. Now the sun rose upon him just as he crossed over Peniel, and he was limping on his thigh. Jacob's purpose in life changed. And at the location where his purpose in life changed, he honored God. Why? He changed the name of the location. For henceforth and forevermore, Jacob will remember Peniel as the place where he strove with God, the place that he wrestled, and the place that he finally said, enough of my own strength, I need yours. Have we ever come to that place? For a lot of us, it's the day that we ask Christ into our heart. For a lot of us, we would say, I did a good job being a Christian for a long time, but then there was another time in my life when I tried to take some of that control back. And I said, I'm going to let you have this, Lord, but I'm going to keep just a little bit of it. That gets us in trouble. We end up, number one, not being successful in life because we try to do things on our own. Number two, we end up driving ourselves absolutely bonkers because we're trying to be what? Self-reliant. And we can't do it. Same thing happened with Jacob. Jacob is scared to death of Esau. Lord, protect me, see me through, but I'm still going to send my family across. I'm still going to set it up to where if something does happen, I still can survive. He changed his name. It means he changed the purpose of Jacob's life. That angel said, no longer will you be known as Jacob, you'll be known as Israel. And Jacob then, in turn, changed the name of the location of the battle to Peniel. I've seen the face of God, and yet I have survived. So the question, the challenge for the evening is this. How self-reliant are we trying to be in our own day-to-day life? If the answer is quite a bit, then consider that. turn your hands over to the Lord and go from this manner. Jacob has been wrestling all night, and he's physically after the angel. But then, when he touches the sinew of the hip, when he dislocates that hip, all of a sudden he goes from here to being in control to grasping and saying, don't leave, bless me. You see the word picture? In our lives, when we try to handle things on our own, we're in attack, we're constantly doing this, and yet there comes a point when we say, Lord, no more of me, I need you. That's the challenge for the night. When you try to do things on your own, when you realize that you're not being successful, when you realize that your own strength won't get it done, turn it over to the Lord.